Thank you for inviting me to address you on the subject of leadership. I wish that I could have done this live, but unfortunately the time difference doesn't allow for that. However, there's a good chance that I will be in your neighborhood later this year, and God willing, I will be able to speak to you in person. In the meantime, this will have to do. So let me get straight to it. The subject of leadership is vast, and there are so many things that one can talk about. But I'm going to speak about just a few things that I believe are vital in being a great leader in the church today to make it the wonderful body that God intended it to be. By the end of this talk, you should have an understanding of a few things, and I'd like to go through those so that you can check if you've got this or not. One, you understand the importance of vision for a leader and ensuring that you have one. Two, we understand the importance of setting goals to achieving this vision. Three, an understanding of the three-step model that Jesus used to train his disciples: learn, live, share. Four, the understanding of the importance of leading by example. We got to walk the talk. And finally, we understand what it means to be a servant leader and how to become one. Hopefully, by the end of this talk, you should have clarity not only about this, but also about your purpose in life as a leader. So let's get to it, and let me begin by telling you a story. There was once an eagle's egg that kind of rolled out of its nest and came to rest among the eggs of a chicken. The mother hen was a little stupid, and it didn't realize that there was an extra egg in its nest. It sat on them until they hatched. And I don't know what it made of this black bird among all her golden chicks, but she raised it like her own. I'm pretty sure that this baby eagle realized it was different from the other birds it was growing up with. But when everyone around you thinks that you're a chicken, you must be a chicken. So it lived among them and grew among them, pecking the dirt like they did. Peck, 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 peck. Once in a way, it would see an eagle way up in the sky, its wings outstretched, and it would feel a desire in its heart to soar like that bird up there did. But then it thought, stop dreaming, you are only a chicken, and it would return to pecking in the dirt. Peck, 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 peck. One day, a huge gust of wind hit the barnyard, and it swept all these birds into the air. The chickens, of course, they dropped like stones to the ground, but the eagle discovered that if it kept its wings spread, it didn't fall. And if it flapped them, it rose, and very soon it was flying high in the air. And from there, up in the clouds, it looked down on the barnyard and said, hey, you know what? I am not a chicken. I am an eagle. What has this story got to do with us? A lot, because I'd like to think of Christians as being like eagles. Before we knew Christ, we may have been like chickens, earthbound, worldly people governed by the flesh, constantly pecking in the ground for the things of this world. But as Christians, we are set free. We are a people who are redeemed, we're saved, we're forgiven. We are blessed, healed, victorious. We have so many other things that Jesus has accomplished for us. In a manner of speaking, we are like eagles. And as leaders, our job is to help people realize that. There are many things about eagles that we can learn from, but I want to focus on just one thing: vision. An eagle is said to be able to spot a rabbit 3 kilometers away, and as leaders, we need to be able to look far. We also need to be able to look wide. Consider the chicken. His eyes are on the ground, and he cannot see beyond the tip of his nose. But the eagle flies high. He can see the big picture. We need to see the big picture. We need to see the whole world. So many people hurting, so many people in pain, so many people struggling with sin. When we see the big picture, we understand that the only way that we can help so many people is by working in collaboration with each other, that we cannot do it on our own. And when we try to do it on our own, we reveal our hearts that this may not be about God. It is more likely about us. There is another aspect of vision, and it is really vital for leaders to have this: a purpose and a plan by which to achieve that purpose. Or if you I want a different analogy, a destination and a route map that gets us there. Or to use the language that we're currently in, a vision and goals that help us to achieve that vision. If you don't have a vision, if you don't have a clear idea of where you want to go, and if you don't have a clear set of goals that will get you there, you won't really get anywhere. You won't really achieve anything. An example would help us to understand this better. So let me talk about this ministry and how it has reached where it has today. Now, I could talk about Christopher Columbus and his vision, but I don't see the point when I have an example that I can speak firsthand about. Don't you think? Besides, it would help you to understand how this ministry came about and the vision of this ministry as well, because you are directly involved with it. HSI is today one of the fastest growing Christian ministries in the world. How did this come about? About 15 years ago, after my conversion, I was reading the Bible, and I came to the end of the book of Matthew where Jesus is commissioning his apostles. He said, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you." And then he ends with these words, "Remember, I am with you always to the end of the age." I felt God speaking to me in that statement, that he was telling me what he wanted me to do. He wanted me to go and make disciples of all nations, and that became my purpose. That became my vision, and I declared it with a vision statement to make disciples of all nations. And HSI was born. Before you leave here, one of the things that you will need to do is to write down a vision statement for yourself. This has to be inspired by God. And the very fact that you are here is a sign that he has already placed something in your heart, that he has already given you a purpose for your life. I will talk more about this later. Let me get back to my story. So now I have my vision. I know what I need to do. I need to make disciples of all nations. The question is how? So I look at my life, the gifts that God has blessed me with, the experiences that I've had, the skills that I have developed, and I see that I can write, I can teach, I can preach, I can do a few other things, so I start doing that. Let me simplify this by confining myself to just the teaching part of it. I start a prayer group. I start teaching people about the faith in this prayer group. People are learning. The numbers grow. We reach 100 people very soon, and I'm very happy. But then I noticed something. The prayer group is great, but the people are not really growing. They're learning about the faith, but they aren't living it. They come for the meetings, get a spiritual high, a spiritual boost as they learn these great things about Jesus. But during the week, they kind of taper off again. Why? Because they're not living the faith. And why are they not living the faith? Because they're not held accountable to live what they learn. Something else was needed. So I came up with this idea of growing people gradually but purposefully in the faith and holding them accountable to one another so that they lived what they learned. 40 people joined this program out of the 100 that we have in the prayer group, and we ended up with what we called a School of Discipleship. And it was an instant hit. Within a few weeks, students were speaking about how much they were growing. And mind you, these were not people who were spiritually raw. These were not people who had just discovered Jesus. These were people who belonged to prayer groups and church groups. And many of them were actually serving as catechists and confirmation teachers. And these people were talking about how much they were growing. We finished one year and we started another. I said, let's see if this works in another country. So I started a second school in Mumbai. I now had 2 groups. But that was far from making disciples of all nations. Remember the vision. The vision was to make disciples of all nations. So how was I to accomplish it? Then the following year, I was invited to give a retreat to 40 priests in England. On the last day of the retreat, I was speaking to these priests about Jesus and how he selected 12 people as his apostles, how he taught them what they needed to do, and then sent them out. I remember telling the priest what a wonderful thing this would be if they followed Jesus' example If they took 12 people, if they trained them for a couple of years, after all, there's so much of learning, so much of experience, and then after they trained them to send them out to do mission, that would be, 12 into 40, 480 people out there making disciples. And if these 480 people were to do the same, we would have the entire world evangelized in no time. Now, I don't know whether the priest did anything with this idea or not, but on the way back, I said, why not do this myself? And the schools took on an added dimension to share. That it wasn't enough for students to learn or to live. They also had to share. Today we have 75 schools around the world, with more starting every week. It is happening. Slowly and steadily, I am achieving what I started to do. So let's come to you, because this is about you. What is your purpose in life? What is your ultimate aim? To be a movie star? To be a millionaire? To climb Mount Everest? Now, there is nothing wrong with having such goals when you are in the world, but we are not people of the world anymore. We are people of God, and our purpose for our life has to be God's purpose for our life. What does He want you to do? What do you think it is? He wants you to make disciples of all nations. This is not my vision for you. I want to say this again. It is Jesus' purpose for your life. In one form or another, you will find all the full gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, ending with this commission given to all of us by Jesus. Go make disciples. And then you decide, in cooperation with Him, how you are going to achieve this purpose for your life. I have discovered a way that works, and once again, this is not my way. This is Jesus' way. Learn, live, share. Learn, live, share. This is what Jesus did. He got people to Him. He taught them. They learned. He practiced what He preached and encouraged them to do the same. They lived. And then He sent them out to teach others, and they shared. Learn, live, share. Let me give you another example, this one from interactions that Jesus had with His apostles that have a lot of lessons to teach us as leaders. One day Jesus had a little child come, and He set this child in front of the group of people He was talking to, and He said to them, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Do you wonder who He was talking to? Believe it or not, He was speaking to His apostles. He was telling these 12 guys that He had chosen that unless they changed, they were not going to enter heaven. I want you to think about this again. His apostles, whom He had chosen to bring others to heaven, were told they may not enter. Why? A little while ago, Jesus had told them He was going to die, but rather than be concerned about Him, they were more concerned about themselves. Two of them, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, they went to Jesus and they said, "Hey, when you get up there, let one of us sit on your left and one of us on your right." Can you imagine the cheek? Well, that's not the end of the story. The other 10 found out what these two guys had done, and they got upset. Why? Because they wanted to sit on His left and right. So Jesus called them to and said, "You guys, come here. What's the matter with you? Nearly 3 years with me and you haven't learned anything. You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the people lord it over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be a servant. And whoever wants to be first must be a slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to offer His life as a ransom for many." You think they learned something? A few days later, they were fighting among themselves again about who was the greatest, which is when Jesus really chewed them out. He said, "You guys want to sit on my right and left in heaven? Oh, I tell you, unless you guys change, forget about sitting on my left and right, you're not even entering heaven." I think they kind of got it then, but Jesus wanted to make sure that this was a lesson that they learned. And this is a lesson that I want to make sure we all learn too, because there are too many leaders in the church today who want to be greater than everybody else. I started this talk by saying we need to become great leaders, but that is great in Jesus' eyes, which means that we need to be the best that we can be, not greater than the person next to us. People in the church today, they want to lord it over everybody else, and all they have succeeded in doing is building their own little fiefdoms, not the kingdom of heaven. To be a Christian leader is to be a servant leader, but this term needs to be clarified because there is a lot of confusion about what a servant leader is. A lot of us have servants, as in domesticated servants, associated in our minds as servants, and we kind of think that is what being a servant leader is. It isn't. I have with me a pyramid. It's actually a kitchen timer that belongs to Natasha. She's in charge of the international schools, and you probably know her. And she lent me this, and it wasn't exactly what I had in mind, but I couldn't have found anything better to illustrate this. This is what servant leadership is. Now, in typical leadership, okay, you have the leader on the top, and everyone else is below him doing whatever he asks them to do. Okay, now let's imagine that on top is Jesus, all right? That's Jesus there. Under him, he has the 12 apostles. That's them there. Under them, there are the 72 that he sent out. That's them there. And under them is the rest of the world. So basically, you have the chain of command, okay? Now, what Jesus did is inverted the pyramid. After he taught the disciples, the apostles, and everybody underneath him what they needed to do, he inverted the pyramid so that now Jesus is at the bottom, okay? Now keep a note of one thing. He doesn't stop being a leader. He is still their leader. He will always be their leader. But the only difference is, instead of going from top down, now what he's doing is kind of saying, you guys are on top now. You do what you need to do, and I will support you from down. An example will make this clear. At the Last Supper Jesus had before he died, Scripture says that he got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel that was tied around them. This is John 13:4-5. After he had washed their feet, he put on his robe and he returned to the table, and he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? Pay attention. You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example that you also should do as I have done to you." We see Jesus in role of leader, then in the role of servant as he flips the pyramid upside down, in effect saying, I'm done imparting my vision to you. Now is your turn to build your pyramids. Just like this. Share your vision with others as I've shared mine with you. And then flip around. Get to the bottom and support them in what they do. It's a tremendous, tremendous concept that works so beautifully, and I've seen it work over the last 14 years as people have grown. They have got there to the top of the pyramid. They have done so many things. Once they were at top of the pyramid, they have built people up, strengthened them. And then when they kind of felt like, okay, these people kind of know what they need to do, they kind of flipped the pyramid around and said, now you go out. You do what I did, and I will support you from the bottom. And what a wonderful way this is working. And you just need to see the schools, and you probably have evidence of that right in your own country, where you've seen what people have started to do with it. No one's trying to hold on to power like very often sometimes people have the tendency to do. We're just kind of building and growing, letting go, building, growing, letting go. And the other people are doing the same. And it is such a beautiful example. You don't see much of me. You don't hear much from me. Why? Because I think that you guys will do what you need to do, because You're trusting in the Spirit. You're not trusting in man. You're trusting in God's vision for you, not somebody else's. And you're doing, in the end, what God is asking you to do. So if you're like this, then just go out and start to do things, and you will do great things. Why? Because Jesus is there supporting you in everything that you do. Have you ever wondered why Jesus said that we would do greater things than he did? In John 14:12, he says, if anyone has faith in me, he will do what I've been doing. Indeed, he will do greater things than these because I'm going to the Father. The reason is because he is going to support us. Whenever we go out there and we know that we're doing his vision, fulfilling his will, he will support us. There is nothing that you cannot do when it is his kingdom that you're trying to build. The problem is only when we start to build our own kingdoms. So keep this thing in mind, keep this focus in mind, and know that God is with you. This knowledge, truly this knowledge backed by his promise to be with us forever until the end of the age, that should give us the confidence that we need to step out in faith and take up the challenge of great leadership. You are children of the Father, made in his image and likeness, and trust me when I say that you have this in you. You have this great, wonderful Spirit of God within you. Now I've come to the end of basically what I wanted to teach, but what I want you to do now is to kind of go through your life, look at your talents, look at your gifts, look at the charisms that God has blessed you with. Look at your skill sets, look at the experience that you have, look at all these things that you've accumulated over the years, all the knowledge, and kind of put it together to form a vision statement. Now, like I said, this is God's goal for you, God's purpose for your life, that you go out there and make disciples of all nations. But you might feel that God's vision for you is something different. Whatever it is, write it down on a piece of paper. Kind of say, this is my vision, to do this. Let the words begin with T-O, okay? That is your vision, to do this, okay? That's the first thing you need to do. The second thing you need to do after this is, okay, now if this is what I want to do, how am I going to go about doing it? Let us say, for instance, your vision is to reach out to the world's poor, okay? A question, of course, that you need to ask over there is, why do you want to reach out to the world's poor? Your answer could possibly be, I want to reach out to the world's poor because they are hungry and they're starving and I want to help them. But there's got to be a deeper reason for that, right? Why do you want to help them? Why do you want to help them fill their bellies? Because you want to make sure they have life. Now, even though this is a noble thought, what about the life they lead after this? Isn't that more important? Yes, it is important that they live on this earth, but it is also important that they gain eternal life in heaven. So, wouldn't that be part of your goal too? So, what is the goal? To bring these people to eternal life, which means what? To bring them to salvation, which means what? To make disciples of all nations. Eventually, you will find that you're getting back to this plan of God, which is the basic plan, that this is your purpose in life, that no matter what you do is to bring people to God, okay? So, your vision, to make disciples of all nations, if you kind of analyze it, it will always come back to that. Your goal, however, could be based on your desire to help the poor. So, I will bring people to God by doing this. I will reach out to the poor. I will have food camps. I will have outreaches to people to countries where people are starving. I will do these things with ultimate goal as to drawing them to knowledge of Jesus and his salvation. So that's your goal, and once you have your vision and your goal, you basically kind of have a roadmap that kind of tells you how to get from point A to point B. It is so important that you keep this in mind. It is so important that you keep the other things that we spoke about also in mind. And one of the greatest things is humility. It is okay to boast. You've heard me boasting, but whatever boasting I do is in the Lord. It is he who gives the vision, he who inspires the insights. It is he who shows the way. It is he who takes me from one place to another, one point to another. It is he who makes everything happen. And when you kind of got that in your mind, the chance that you will go wrong in what you do is very little. Now, I would like to ask you to go ahead and complete your exercise. You will find that even though these are the two main questions, there are a few other questions over there. One very important question there is why. Why do you want to do this? God says, go make disciples of all nations. Why do you want to do it? Because it feels like the right thing to do? Well, that's a good answer. Because I want to be obedient to God? That is a good answer too. But it's got to be able to motivate you. It's got to be able to propel you into doing this, and not half-heartedly. I'm always reminded of Jesus' words to the Laodiceans. He says, I wish you were either hot or cold, but because you're neither, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. Leaders have to burn with passion because this is something that can be seen. Once again, talking about myself, I'm the best example for myself. I cannot be lukewarm about this. I cannot be laid back about this. This is my burning desire to make disciples of all nations. And when I talk of all nations, I'm speaking of every single human being on this planet. And you might say that is daft, but is it really? Don't you want to save everybody? But you might say, no, everybody cannot be saved. Even Jesus didn't save everybody. Hey, that's not the point. The point is, I know where I was headed 25 years ago. And I know if it wasn't for the grace of God, I would, after my death, be consigned to eternal fire, separated from God forever. I know that. That knowledge motivates me to stop other people from making this mistake, which means that I go out and I do my best wherever I can, whenever I can, to bring people to knowledge of Christ. I've realized I cannot do that on my own, which is why I need you. And so when you get on board, you too start to do the same thing. How does it work? Can everybody be saved? There is a story that I am very fond of telling, and if you've heard me speak before, there is a good chance that you might have heard me say this, but I would like to repeat the story, and it's a nice way to end this lesson as well. There was once a big storm, and a whole lot of starfish were swept on the shore, thousands and thousands of them. And unless they were returned to the sea, they were all going to die. A woman came for a walk on the seashore, and she saw one single solitary man, standing by the side of the shore, bending down, picking up a starfish or two and throwing it into the sea, bending down, picking up another, throwing it into the sea. And she kind of looked at him and thought what a stupid guy he was. I mean, thousands and thousands of starfish. What is this guy going to do? And finally, she couldn't keep her thoughts to herself. She decided to go and talk to this man. So she went to him and said, hey, come on, what you're doing is foolish. Thousands of starfish. What difference could you possibly make to them? And the man had a starfish in his hand, and he said, I don't know about them, but I know it's going to make all the difference in the world to this one. And he threw it back into the sea. The woman looked at him for a long minute, thought about what he said, and looked at the starfish and said, okay, maybe I can't save them all, but I can save a few. And she started bending down, picking up the starfish and throwing them in the sea. Now there were other people sitting at the beach, having fun, playing games, doing the kind of things that people do at the beach. And they saw what these two people were doing, and they said, why don't we go and help them? And they came forward, and before you knew it, every starfish was back in the sea. It all begins with a few people who see the vision, a few people who want to appropriate it for themselves, a few people who say, I can do it and I will do it. And it is my hope that you who are sitting over there say, I can do it. And trust me when I say you can. Why? One, because God is asking you to. And when he asks you to do something, he will make sure that you're able to do it. And two, we're all meant to go to heaven. And I would like to see everybody up there. Until then, I hope to see you in New Zealand when I come there later this year. Programs for September, October. And God willing, I will get a chance to meet you. And hopefully we'll be able to exchange a few words. If there are things that you want to ask about, things you want to talk about. I will be there, but you don't need to really wait for me. You can always write to me at any time that you want. Mike has my email address, so do most of the other people who are looking after you, and please feel free anytime. Hope you enjoyed this talk, and I hope that you've got answers and a better understanding of all the things I told you that you would get a better understanding of. But more than that understanding, what I really would like to see is every one of you having a vision and a set of goals that will lead you to where you want to go to. Grow the kingdom of God and be blessed for it. Thank you. Bye.